Hello, hello, hello. I think that's okay. This. Hello, hello, hello. I think that's okay. This. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of Entente. Just a gentle reminder, please keep your phones on silent mode. You're requested not to leave the auditorium until the dignitaries have left the dais. Thank you. Please keep your phones on silent mode. Thank you. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of Entente, our international conference, Humanities, Social Sciences, Management, Education Technology, and Library Sciences. A warm welcome to all our esteemed dignitaries, our leadership, guests, my dear Newtons, and a special and warm welcome to the Nani Chao students who are here with us. We are thrilled to share this special day with you all. I request the Honorable Keynote Speaker, Harpal Singh Ji, and Professor Prakash Gopalan, President NIT University, to kindly grace the dais. NIT University is proud to host this conference for the third time. Entente has become an institutionalized platform for students, researchers, academics, industry players to network, exchange ideas, and disseminate research findings, a conglomeration of thought leaders and opinion makers, an idea which is truly exemplified in the title of our conference, Entente, a friendly alliance and gathering of people. At NIT University, organizing Entente is one of our ventures to facilitate deliberation on the changing paradigms in the field of language, literature, social sciences, education, and management. The wide spectrum of sub-themes will facilitate integrating the complex array of ethical, psychological, social, economic, cultural, linguistic, literary, political, and administrative concerns in research and pedagogy. Conference attempts to provide an international platform for all the academicians, researchers, industry personnel, and students to share their research studies and innovative ideas in their domains. To begin this conference, let us pay tribute to Mother Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge. I request the dignitaries on the dais to kindly light the lamp. Thank you, dear students, for this melodious tribute. May I now request Professor Prakash Gopalan, President, NIT University, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Very good morning to one and all. It's a matter of great pleasure for me to welcome all the delegates to this meeting, this conference on Entente, which is in its third edition. I'm told the first edition and the second edition, the first edition was all online. The first was all online. The second was in a hybrid mode, as is this one. And just a while ago, outside of this auditorium, we were talking about how conferences are supposed to be. They are supposed to be an exchange of minds. And I think those exchange of minds can only happen when two people sit across the table and have a conversation. So I think it will be our endeavor to have the future editions of Entente totally in a in-person mode. So that's something that I would like the conference organizers to remember and strive for as we move ahead. So this is an international conference in humanities and social sciences, management, as well as educational technology. It gives me immense pride to deliver this inaugural address today. Entente truly embodies and projects the seamlessness principle that we kind of subscribe to at NIT University. And in many ways, it propagates it. It's a coming together seamlessly, of course, of humanities and social sciences, people in management, and people in educational technology. As you all know, we run this university on those four core principles of industry linked, technology based, research driven, and being seamless. Research driven and seamless obviously will lead to interdisciplinarity in the kind of work that we do here today, be it teaching, be it research. And I think at the end of the day, much of it is done with societal implications in mind. We should never be sitting in some kind of an ivory tower trying to say that we do this or we do that. And unless and until what we do has societal implications, it comes to almost being nothing in some sense. So every area here or domain is following new pedagogic approaches like research-based approach to teaching or project-based learning, as we say. And then such multi-dimensional environment steers to occupational, spatial, and temporal mobility, which means essentially a seamless life. Organizing this conference is one of the ventures to facilitate deliberations on changing paradigms in the field of language and literature, social sciences, and management. The wide spectrum of, sorry, there are messages coming here on the screen repeatedly, so there's nothing that I'm able to do. The wide spectrum of subcultural, linguistic, literacy, political, and administrative concerns in research and pedagogy will definitely be taken up here. This conference attempts to provide an international platform for the academicians, researchers, industry personnel, and students to share their research studies and innovative ideas in their respective domains. It's also meant to promote research studies in the area of humanities, commerce, economics, and management. It aims to bridge the gap and promote intellectual exchange between researchers, students, and the industrial workforce. Before we kickstart this conference, let me take this opportunity to express a word of gratitude, a sense of gratitude for all those who have come here and who have contributed to making this event a success. This event would not have been possible without the support of everyone who's present in this auditorium today. So thank you on behalf of the organizers, I being one of them. People who have been chosen as participants in the conference have been chosen for a reason because of their passion for research, writing, analysis, as well as collaborative learning. Your passion for these common goals helps us bring all of you together and to unite the energy in the realization of these goals. In the coming 3 days, there will be a lot of learning for you. I hope you will make the best use of your time. We have a beautiful, for those who have come from outside, and there are many of you who I can sense in this auditorium today. It will be worth your while if you can go around the campus, kind of take into yourself the beauty that this place has to offer and to have some relaxing time out here. That is, of course, besides the time that the people, the organizers would let you have, of course. So enjoy your time and make sure that you remember that there is nothing, that there's a lot more than Neemrana Fort in this town of Neemrana, and that this university kind of can stand up for itself in this town and say that we make Neemrana proud. I think I move on from here and I take on a bigger role now, and that is to introduce the guest of the day, the speaker of the day, the keynote speaker of the day for us, Sir Harpal Singh. The third edition is even more special as one of the dearest members of the NU family. Mr. Harpal Singh has graced the occasion as the keynote speaker for Entente 2023. Harpal Singh is recognized worldwide as a thinker and speaker on the integration of global healthcare. Harpal Singh has a diverse and wide-ranging experience of more than 40 years in the corporate sector. In the last decade, he has substantially engaged with the not-for-profit sector and holds senior board-level positions in national as well as international organizations addressing social causes around disadvantaged children, public health, the girl child, and the environment. An alumnus of the Doon School and a honors graduate in economics from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi. He is also a BS in economics and holds a master's in public affairs from the California State University at Hayward, California, USA. Harpalji started his career in the Tata Administrative Services, where he held senior positions with the Tata and later on with the Birla and the Mahindra Group of companies. He was chairman and MD of Fortis Healthcare Limited and SRL Diagnostics Limited. He is director of Impact Projects Private Limited and was the non-executive chairman of India's largest pharmaceutical company, Ranbaxy. He is and has been associated with school education for over the last 30 years and has served at the board level with some of India's most renowned schools, which include the Doon School, the Scindia School, the Sriram School, the Yadvindra Public School, and the Salwan Public School. He was a member of the National Roundtable on School Education, a member of the Executive Committee and of the Governing Council of the Public Health Foundation of India, a member of the board of the Delhi Red Cross Society, a member of the Board of Governors of NIIT University, a member of the UK Roundtable and the US Strategic Dialogue. He is a trustee of the Indian National Association for the Club of Rome. He was a member of the board of the Vadhwani Initiative for Sustainable Health. He is the founder chairman of the Nanni Chha Foundation, of which many students are present here today in the audience, and was also a member of the board of governors of IIT Indore. He was a chairman of the Save the Children India and a board member and vice chair on the global board of Save the Children International, based out of the UK. Through his own NGO, the Nanni Chha Foundation, he focuses efforts on the girl child, on the environment, and on the interfaith harmony. Harpalji, we thank you for gracing the occasion. May I now invite you to deliver the keynote address and inspire all of the people present in this auditorium. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. And I have to say that it's always a delight to come to the NU campus, if for no other reason than for the wonderful environment that the campus is situated in. And I'm sure that many of you, some of you who are young new students at NU, those who are visiting us from other institutions, and of course, some of our very young who are at school level from the Nanni Chha Foundation initiative, who are here. So in this sense, it is a rather interesting combination of faculty members who are here, researchers, students, young citizens of the country. So may I also extend a very warm welcome to you all at this third sort of session of the Entente initiative. in many ways, in many ways, the world is moving at such an incredible pace. And that reality of the pace of change is actually now we're all sort of quite aware of. And I don't think any of us here, no matter young or somewhat older, will deny the fact that change is at an incredible pace. What hasn't as yet, I think, caught the imagination enough is not to say that it's not there, but it hasn't as yet caught the imagination in its fullness, is the fact of the interconnectedness of all things. And that's a pretty all-encompassing idea if you think about it. If I make the statement to say that everything is connected with everything else. And in some senses, if I may say, use the terminology of the young, it's a mind-blowing idea. Because you can allow yourself the liberty of really walking through ideas and challenging yourself to think, what is the merit of this sort of comment? And I think we're going to spend a little time on that. And just also to say that as young people or as academicians, the more and more we recognize the power of this interconnectedness, greater the likelihood that our educational level, whatever it might be, will be enhanced. And that actually is the central premise. And if you think about it, NU in its foundational principles, and I might say that I've been associated with NU almost since inception. So I often come here, and some of my I would say my younger colleagues in the faculty are probably bored by seeing me here all the time. But anyway, I must say that I'm delighted to be here. But if you will recall, in the very early years, we started with a particular focus on IT and engineering. That's where we began the journey. But very quickly we recognized that it's not sufficient for students who come to this university to only have an exposure to IT and to engineering. Because if that is the only exposure, it's likely to be limiting in the sense of producing a wholesome student, if not a wholesome citizen. And therefore, beyond our core principles of industry-linked, technology-based, research-driven, and seamlessness, we recognize that there is something more that we need to do. And ENTENTE, in some senses, is actually a culmination of that idea, which is to say that we need to expose our students and, in a sense, be part of the global fraternity that recognizes that all areas of human inquiry, doesn't matter what discipline it is, all arenas of human inquiry, in a sense, are connected with each other. And I think that is the essence of the ENTENTE idea as well. But as Professor just mentioned, the focus of ENTENTE in many ways is also to give life to the idea of seamlessness. And seamlessness means this, really, that it fuses, it cross-fertilizes all disciplines. So if you have to research a particular area, it's not just sufficient to understand that particular focus area, but it's also important to understand its interconnectedness with all else. And hence, in this institution, where we started with the idea that we will teach IT and engineering, we introduced the whole arena of the humanities and the social sciences. And ENTENTE's focus, as you all know, is in that particular area. And I'm sure that in its third edition, we would have taken substantive steps to reinforce the thought and therefore hopefully have children and students better informed and more educated. It can also be said that knowledge which is exclusionary. In other words, you say, I'm going to study this to the exclusion of everything else. Actually speaking, for almost about 100 years, that was the idea. There was a huge idea to suggest that, focus. And as we run through the morning session, you will find more and more that this exclusionary idea has now actually evolved into an inclusionary idea, which is to say all things are related to each other. So if you want to be substantively knowledgeable, I think that idea needs to pervade your thinking. And just to give you an example, I mean, there are, we're an engineering institution. If a good engineer is asked to build a bridge, and the bridge in technical terms is an exceptional piece of work, because he's an exceptional engineer. But if the bridge did not recognize the kind of people who would use the bridge, would there be pedestrians? Would there be vehicles? Would there be cyclists? If that engineer didn't also consider that, then his bridge might be exceptional at one level, but may not be very useful at another. And therefore, its effectiveness would be hugely compromised. So a good engineer must recognize that they must take consideration as to who is going to be the user. Is it cost effective? Is it something that will last for the number of years that it is designed to last? And hence, that engineering student must have a scope of knowledge well beyond engineering skills. You can apply that almost to anything. If you are a biology student, let's say, and you want to study the intricacies of DNA, and then in that study of DNA, you're focused on the idea that I want to study about DNA with the objective of extending life, human life, or for that matter, the life of any living entity. Now, you could focus on that, but it is now being suggested that if you just focus on the idea of extending life without understanding the implications of what that extension might cause, then you would be less than considered knowledgeable. And that, incidentally, would have many, many implications if you want to extend life. And I leave you with the thought of saying, if I am a biologist and I have suddenly discovered an arena of being able to extend life, what would be the implications of that knowledge or that discovery? And I can tell you in history, there have been many occasions where this has happened. The famous founder of the atom and its potential, Oppenheimer, actually battled with himself, recognizing that that discovery has the potential of huge benefit to humanity, but was very, very mindful and also very concerned at its potential downsides as well. So as a good researcher, as a good academic, it was good that he contended with that idea, and I suspect that some of his stuff that he did think about, did have very, very substantive implications on how the world dealt with this very powerful potential of the atom. Now, the other thing is that whatever knowledge that we want children to have, what we want ourselves to have, at the end of the day, knowledge just simply for the sake of it, at one level is a good idea. But knowledge to be effective to the benefit of mankind or to the benefit of the planet is, actually speaking, much, much more interesting than just simply the search of it. And I suspect that the vast majority of us are more concerned with that is what is the effectiveness of the knowledge I possess. Now, for instance, we know that in the social sciences, or sorry, in the world of nature, life on the planet has evolved over time. All forms of life, be they plants or be they animal or be they whatever else, actually as it survives today, is a phenomenal example of being able to recognize the interconnectedness of things. No form of life, though every form probably has a unique quality, but no form of life would have been able to survive if it didn't also have to contend with many other complex environments. So it had to actually deal very, very effectively in a complex environment, which included the elements, which included geography, which included climate, which included local circumstances, and therefore, for that living thing, plant, animal, or whatever, it actually is proof that it latently, without formally, but latently it understood and addressed the idea of interconnectedness. And I think that's the important thing to remember, that evolution, that survival, that sustainability, all actually, if you wish to understand them in their entirety, then you must actually recognize the importance of interconnectedness. And therefore, in a sense, if I may say, here is a proposition that I'm going to read to you, which I sort of thought I would sort of share with you. And that is that all forms, it doesn't matter what area of study you wish to engage in. You want to study engineering, you want to study biology, you want to study management. It doesn't matter what arena of area that you want to study. Remember one thing, that if you wish to be considered knowledgeable and effective, you must also contend with the idea that I must have a wide-angle lens which touches a wide arena of endeavors and a wide arena actually of disciplines. So therefore, if you wish to be that kind of a student, this interconnectedness of things is something that you must sort of address and know how to deal with. So the proposition that hopefully I'm going to read it to you, and I'd like you to reflect on it. You know, not once, I suspect you should reflect on it for the rest of your life. And that is that no matter what subject or area you want to study, engineering, IT, economics, health, geography, your knowledge and your effectiveness will not only depend upon the knowledge you have of that particular chosen subject, but will be greatly enhanced if you know about the interconnectedness of your subject with many others. Does that make sense? Guys, put up your hands here. Does that make sense to you? That if you are a student, no matter of what subject, your effectiveness of knowledge will greatly be enhanced. And if you followed that thinking, not only will your knowledge be enhanced, but I suspect that it will open up many more opportunities for you if you imbibe that thinking. So there will be many, many more vistas that will open up by understanding. Now, you can apply that thinking almost to any arena, frankly. Doesn't matter which arena you want to choose. But I'm going to choose 3 of areas which I thought I would spend a little extra time on, and just to bring home this point. I'm hoping that as we are going along, the point is getting more and more sort of forceful in its. The 3 areas are: one, in information technology, and there I've spent a little short comment on IoT, which is the Internet of Things. Some of you might have heard about it, but we'll spend a little time on it. We'll spend a little time on the field of economics, and then, of course, on the field of public health. Professor's already mentioned about the fact of seamlessness, and we've talked about that as almost in the same sort of arena of interconnectedness. Now, you know, in the 1980s, we had a situation where computers were very much in use, but the kind of computers that were in use were these big mainframe computers. So just to give you some sense to some of the younger lot who are here, your iPhone that you have, or your smartphone that you have today that you possess, its capability would have to be captured in the 70s and the early 80s in a mainframe computer that would be the size of this campus. Think about it. Your little contraption that you're holding, if its capacity was to be computed and used in the 1970s and the 80s, the size of that entity mainframe would be the size of this campus, or close to it anyway. That's how much things have changed. So anyway, in the 70s and the 80s, we had this thing called the Internet of Things. And that was that these different mainframes and some desktops and some of the early computing systems were connected through networks. These big monstrosities, they were connected by networks. And it was estimated that by 2020, which is 3 years ago, the number of connections, the number of devices of this kind that were connected was estimated at 25 billion. 25 billion devices were connected. Now, that's one area. So you can say, okay, so what? So what if 25 billion are connected? But here's the big one. The estimate is that by 2025, which is 2 years from now, the value in revenue terms that this connectivity, now with not only the mainframes and the big computers, but now to your home appliances, to your car, to your refrigerator. I mean, these now devices, the multiplication of devices that are now connected are a whole different range. Everything is almost connected these days. So if the value that is being created as a consequence of interconnectedness, and that's the point I want to make, the value in revenue terms is going to be $13 trillion. $13 trillion, which means what? Which means almost 5 times India's current GDP. That's the value creation. And so therefore understand that it is this interconnectedness that is creating this phenomenal value. And therefore, if you're a student of IT and you do not know the potential that you actually are getting engaged with, then your knowledge will be limited. But if I suddenly get to know that what I am doing is likely to have an impact of this magnitude, I think education takes on a whole new meaning. And that's our objective. As I was driving here this morning, I picked up a news report that they have just yesterday, that is Wednesday, they have a paper has come out on material sciences. And that paper says that through the work of a variant of ChatGPT, that means this is a variant of ChatGPT, and you all, and I'm sure many of you now use it, a variant of that has identified 380,000 new materials unknown to us so far, unknown to us. And that is a number, incidentally, that is a number which is a multiple of the number of materials currently known to mankind. And what is currently known to mankind is actually the accumulation of millennia. And suddenly, by one stroke, as on yesterday, the world has suddenly become aware of 380,000 new material forms and the potential implications of that. And how has this happened? Because of the power of interconnection. So this is obviously a big arena, and if you all do not imbibe this idea in its wholesomeness, I think you will be at a decided disadvantage as compared to many others who will have that knowledge. Now, the other side of knowing about this is also critically important. This vast amount of interconnectedness between devices is producing, quantums of data that is difficult to imagine. And this quantum of data is affecting many aspects of human life, if not life of the planet. So there are issues of rights that are coming up. How much does the state know, which now has access to vast amounts of data? How do privacy rights get affected by the fact of the data that is getting involved? How will our security get affected? The horrific attack in Israel and Palestine was actually a security lapse, notwithstanding the fact that a vast amount of data information. So not knowing about the power of interconnectedness would be a serious fault, and therefore would urge all of you to look at it. Let me take up the second arena that I said I would touch on, and that's economics and economic theory. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, for a long time, academicians, great thinkers, thought that the way to get to the bottom of things is to focus. Right? So if you're wanting to discover DNA, focus on that. And nobody can deny the importance of that focus, because it has produced vast amounts of very good outcomes for us, for humanity. So this is not a comment to suggest that focus is not important. It is important. However, focus without understanding what it might end up is actually equally problematic. So the idea is how to understand that connectivity. And I'll give you an example for those who wish to study economics and all. Economic theory for 100 years was based on two fundamental premises. What was the premise? That humans act rationally. And the second premise was a very interesting comment, which economists, of course, know about, which is called ceteris paribus, which is all things being equal. Which means they said, let's put everything as a given, nothing changes that. Humans act rationally, and therefore economic theory was built on those two premises. And for a while, that produced some fairly good outcomes. We had vast amounts of economic theory. We have vast amounts of that theory applied to the world in formulating policies and actions for the world. It's true. And yet, very soon we also began to find that there are serious chinks in that armor. The principle that economic theory, principle one, that humans act rationally. Well, now there's a whole range of behavioral economics that is suggesting actually humans do not act rationally. And all of you, incidentally, every one of you who's sat up with mom and dad and said you wanted to go out for that night out, and you were putting all your arguments forward. Many of those arguments, if you remember, had nothing to do with rational thought. Had everything to do with emotion. I have a girlfriend to meet. I have a boyfriend to meet. I have this friend who's coming in from somewhere that I must go to. And, you know, I haven't had a drink so far. And dad tells me not to drink. So it's not rational arguments and rational conversations and rational decisions that humans largely follow. Not to say that they don't follow, but it's a matter of debate of how much of human decision-making is rational and how much is it based on two new realities. One is the reality of emotion, and the second is a very interesting reality of identity. Who am I? Which grouping am I a part of? What is my nationalism? What is the community I come from? Lot of my decisions, as when it comes to economic theory, is based on that reality and less to do with rationality. And therefore, as a student of economics, if you do not recognize that I have to explore the idea of decision-making through the lenses of emotion, through the lenses of identity, I'm not likely to come up with economic policies that are likely to be successful. So as a student of economics, you must make sure that this is the case. And you know, there's a mentor of NU who has visited us often, one Mr. Arun Maira, who himself is a great thinker, writer, member of the Planning Commission. He has come here on many occasions. I've known him for decades. And he has been propounding a new sort of economic theory. And he says that unless and until you form a systems approach to the formulation of policy, of economic policy, you're unlikely to be successful. And what is a system? A system is a complex environment of many different things that work together to produce outcomes, whatever be the nature of that outcome we desire. And so the suggestion that if you went back, let's say 150 years ago, before the first really substantive book written by Adam Smith came out on economics, if you went back, economists, incidentally, historically, would be talking about things like philosophy, things like the social sciences, things like society. Those were the conversations that economists used to indulge in. And then came the error of those two premises, which was parables and rationality. And somehow economic theory became devoid of its connections with society. So here you have a reality, for instance. We are the fastest growing economy in the world today. Many other economies also grew. China grew for many decades at a fast pace. But having said that, vast quantums of humanity today, and therefore, obviously, this growth happened because of some very good economic models. But this growth happened with vast quantities of the very poor still on the planet. And this is partly for the fact that economists did not recognize that emotion, that other aspects of societal issues must also be brought into our economic modeling for us to actually be successful economists, and hence successful policymakers, and hence successful actors who will implement these policies. And I think that is the important arena that you all as economists. And I'll give you a little very interesting example. Are you all familiar with the idea of zero defect production? Are you familiar? I'll give you some background. You know, one of the most powerful sectors in the world was the automobile sector in the world. In the early part of the 20th century, when automobiles began to get, the lead in manufacturing was by the United States. They were the big players in the world of automobiles. Mid of that, the 50s and the 60s, post the war, Japan began to emerge as a major producer of automobiles. And Japan then, by the end of the 20th century, actually began to beat the Americans in terms of global production. And they did this on one simple, wonderful premise called zero defect. In other words, they said, we produce vehicles that have no defects. Whereas in the American scheme of things, the argument was, okay, if you have a few defects, so what? You know, so what? It doesn't matter. We'll deal with them in after-sales service or whatever. So Americans began to lose their hold on the automobile industry because the Japanese now were producing zero defect vehicles. So it took the Americans another 2 decades to figure this out, and then they also climbed the ladder and began to make zero defect vehicles. So when they reached that point, a group of media people and some people from the sector went to visit the chairman of Toyota and said, Mr. Chairman, now that American industry now has also now reached a point where we are producing zero defect vehicles, so what are you going to do now to stay ahead? What are you going to do? You're caught up now. So the chairman turned to these people and said, okay, I'm going to answer you that question in a way by telling you how I now in Toyota, how we constitute our product development team. And he says that my product development team for the next several decades is going to constitute a psychologist, a sociologist, an anthropologist, and also an engineer. And now these media people, they're sort of wondering, Mr. Chairman, we are asking something, what kind of an answer is this? So the chairman sort of stopped for a moment and then looked and with a big smile on his face, said to them, see, we are already ahead of you. Look at this, a vastly engineering field, completely now overtaken by an arena, nothing to do with engineering. Because what was the comment that the world of engineering and the automobile sector was saying? Producing a zero defect car is a given now. Don't even be in the business if you cannot produce a zero defect car. That the engineers have already solved. But now, if I'm driving a car and I'm 70 years old, when I drive my car, I want to feel like a 40-year-old. So it's psychology now in marketing. And yet I'm 70 years old, but I want to feel like a 40-year-old, but I also have, a hip that pains. So my car now must also deal with a paining hip and yet deliver me the objective of feeling like a 40-year-old. So see how, if you wish to be an automobile engineer, you better learn how to work with sociologists, psychologists, and the like, if you wish to be. And that brings you back to the premise of interconnectedness. So now, let me take up another area. So the world of economics, of course, therefore, economic theory has sort of changed. And I'm going to touch a little bit on public health simply for the fact that it is current. So can I put up that first slide, first exhibit, please? And I won't spend much time on it because I think it's... Yeah. Can I have that first exhibit? So while they put that up, no, this is the second one. The first one, yeah, there. Now, if you look at that exhibit, if you are a student of public health, this is incidentally a extract that I took out from one of the presentations made by one of our senior colleagues in public health of the Public Health Foundation of India, which I've been a founder board member. And look what this slide says. On the left side, it talks about the 4 disciplines that they will have to engage with if you wish to be a good student of public health. So whether you like it or not, environmental and life sciences, whether you like it or not, economics and management, whether you like it or not, humanities and social sciences, and of course, epidemiology and the allied sciences. Just imagine, you're a student of public health. And if you don't study all these, you will be a less than good student of public health. And look at the comment on the right-hand side. It makes two very interesting comments. The Public Health Foundation says that our DNA of the foundation is transdisciplinary learning. That's our DNA. And the second is that therefore, if we have to put this knowledge to work, it has to be multi-sectoral. Now, there cannot be a more powerful comment about interdependence than that. And so all of you, whether you're a student or you're a faculty member or whoever, or a simple citizen, please understand that everything is at the end of the day connected. And again, now think about it. Our most recent sort of challenge, which we all have been sort of talking about, the country has been talking about, certainly the NCR has been talking about, which is pollution. There is not a gathering of policymakers, of nice evenings over dinner with friends, or a social gathering where AQI is not talked about. And if you have to talk about AQI in a setting, incidentally, and you're sitting in a gathering, you will hear a view from an agriculturist, you will hear a view from a scientist, you will hear a view from a health expert, you will hear a view from the person who has to, deny economic activity, a construction guy. Just look at the domains that you have to touch just to discuss this one idea called pollution. So if you're a student, you must understand this interconnectedness of things. Another very interesting example, of course, is COVID. Here is a biological entity, right? So the student of biology will study this, what is his character, what is his DNA, what have you. But that student cannot but also be engaged with the consequences of COVID on economic activity, on life and death, on health systems, on the pharmaceutical industry, on public policy. Just look at the ramifications of this across the arena. And again, there again, what is it pointing to? Interconnectivity. That things are connected. Everything is connected to everything else. And therefore, take home this idea that if you wish to engage in any arena, please be mindful of this interconnected, this character. Okay, so that's public health for you. I'm going to spend just a very quick little comment. See, I've talked about the disciplines and subjects of, so whether you're an economics student or whether you are a humanities student or whether you are an engineering student, these are academic disciplines. But this idea actually permeates well beyond academic disciplines. And when I was thinking about coming and talking to you all, I said to myself, so what would be another interesting thing? Because you can almost take anything. But I said, let's take a drop of water. Let's take a drop of water. And can you now put up that second? Also, this is a little diagram that I sort of put together just to show, here is a drop of water. It is the cause of clouds and snow. It is the cause of where cities have grown and how it affects communities and people. It is life's elixir. It doesn't matter what form of life. It builds the ocean, air and vegetation, deserts, fauna, oxidation. And look at the outer green comments. They are all different disciplines. and therefore brings home the point that this idea of interconnectedness, and think of one more very interesting comment. So here is the water idea, and I'm just going to leave you with that. It just is to bring home the point. Just before we came here over breakfast, Lekyu Singh gave an example that there's a set of villages in Maharashtra, or a whole pretty large area in Maharashtra, where they were doing Musambi farming, and how people who were involved in seeing how they can propagate the crop, they had developed a lot of information and knowledge about watering, about how to give fertilizer, how deep does the water need to go, is life that is critical to support that which is things like earthworms and the like. And they were able to do some research and come up with some very, very good conclusions in terms of productivity and outcomes. And by one stroke of pressing a button, this information was suddenly available to a vast number of farmers of the territory to benefit from. Again, power of interconnectivity. And goes back to the comment that it is this interconnectedness that is generating global revenue. This same thought 40 years ago would have taken us 20 years to get to all those farmers. And therefore, another 10 years thereafter to grow the Mosambik trees, which then would generate the revenue now almost instantaneously. It will generate this revenue. And that is the power. That is the power of interconnectivity. And I would urge all of you to sort of think about that. And like I said, one thing is to know it. The other is to imbibe it, and then to make it part of your thinking as an almost natural reaction to anything you do in life. Now, in nature, we know if we do not prevent global temperature from rising more than 2 degrees by 2040, the world will be seriously in trouble. That's how connected just the simple fact of a temperature going from X to something else. How interconnected. Again, another thought is, you know, this one single reality, if air did not move, for a moment think about this, huh? If air did not move, all life on the planet would end. So it's not the air, it is air and the fact of its movement. If air did move, all life on the planet would disappear. All life. It's the movement of air that allows life to persist. So with that, I do wish to end and say that the conclusion for us at ENTENTE 23, for the disciplines that we have chosen in the humanities, and for those, clearly speaking, they are very fundamentally connected, and they are connected to other disciplines as well. And I hope that future editions of ENTENTE will take that idea and take it deeper. We are therefore also suggesting that the fourth principle of NU, which is seamlessness, actually addresses this idea of interconnectedness. And therefore, we are saying to you, as students and academicians, please bring home this very important aspect of interconnectedness and its power to all the academic work that we do. And I suspect that if we do that, then not only will you become better students, but you will become better citizens. And beyond better citizens, there are two parts of this, which is very, very crucial, I think. And that is that up until now, nature was the principal mover of how life evolved on the planet. For good or for bad, it's the Homo sapien now that is likely to decide what will happen on the planet. And therefore, my sense is that if we all understand the power of interconnectedness, that as citizens, we will be better informed and be better citizens, because we are likely then to make better choices in whatever be the nature of endeavor that we are all involved with. Thank you very much, and I'm glad that for giving me the time.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. We're truly fortunate to have had the privilege of listening to this wonderful address on interconnectedness. Our dear Newtons and I think nurturers, everyone included, must be very excited to ask questions. So we open the floor for questions or comments or anything that you'd like to discuss. So please raise your hand so that we can send the mic to you and then we can start the Q&A. You keep the mic there. Yeah. So can we see a show of hands so that we know where to take the mic to? Adira, I thought you were raising your hand. So can we give the mic to?
If you are all perfectly agreeable to the premise that everything is interconnected and you have no question, then we are a job well done.
So my question is just that you were talking about no defect manufacturing and all that. So I just want to know, like, how do you think us as students can try to strive for no defect learning? Because a lot of learning comes from making mistakes, right? But also making mistakes means you make mistakes and there are losses there. So how do we try to, while learn from mistakes, also go for the no defect approach?
Well, really good question, I must say. So let me answer it this way. The aspiration should always remain zero defect, the aspiration. And yet, reality is that we learn through mistakes. And my comment to people, to ourselves, and in many of the organizations that I have worked with, including in the social sector, is there are two ways to look at a mistake. If a mistake causes no learning, then it is incidentally a cost. And all costs must be minimized. If a mistake contributes to significant learning, then it should not be termed as a cost, it should be termed as an investment. So mistakes from which learning happens are assets and are investments. We are happy to make that investment. But if you don't learn anything from it, then it's a cost and we'd like to see how we can minimize it. So keep the aspiration high of zero defect, but don't worry too much about the fact that you might make mistakes. What we want you to do, and this I always tell young people, is please be proactive in your earlier years. Make your mistakes early, because the consequences will be small. If you take no initiatives in your early years, don't make the mistakes, don't get pulled up by your parents, don't get pulled up by your class teacher for a mistake that you might have made, but learned from it, then you somehow don't do that. And then in later years, you make one big mistake and that will sort of completely knock you out. So being proactive, taking chances, risk-taking is a reality of life. Please do take your risks. And I can tell you this for all the young, maybe professor might disagree with me, on this one. I say, go out and breach some boundaries here. Breach boundaries, for God's sake. Every single academician of the world breached boundaries. Do you know that Charles Darwin, who wrote his famous works on the evolution of species, do you know that he did not himself publish his works simply for the fear that all those who were believers in faith, and every faith had its own definition of how life evolved, and he thought that he would be completely destroyed if he was to say. So he bought it, he took the research to its level, but didn't publicize it. He left it to others to publicize it. So, but he took the risk of doing the research at least, and then was mindful of the fact that maybe I shouldn't go beyond this. So all of us actually should follow probably the same principle. Be proactive, take a few risks, take them early, so that the consequences, if there are any on the downside, are few, but there's always the upside of learning.
Yeah. Can we have the mic this side?
Morning, I'm Ayush Ganguly, second year BBA student. So interconnectedness is important and it actually connects everybody in the world. But my question was that each human is different. Each human has his own different capabilities, his own way of taking things, doing work. Specialization is also different at the end of the day. So how does that affect interconnectedness? Because every species on this earth has its own different mind and capabilities, takes things, ideas, different ways. So how that affects interconnectedness?
Well, I think you're absolutely right to say that, say every human is in many ways unique, but in very significant ways similar, right? Do you know what is the genetic difference between an ape and a human? Minuscule in DNA terms, minuscule. But that one minuscule difference is unique and therefore creates the distinction. So one is that we all must recognize that every living thing in a sense has its own. No two trees are the same. You can plant the set of seeds from the same tree. Each plant has a certain amount of commonality and also has a certain amount of uniqueness. So this is a fact of life. So I don't think that should bother us at all. But what we do wish to say is that if we therefore, there are several things. For instance, in our recent comments, one of the speakers at a conference in the Nanisha conference, we had a global speaker on AI. And I told him that Nanisha's 3 objectives are protecting girls and empowering women, planting trees and promoting environmental friendliness, and the third was interfaith harmony. So I asked this global speaker on AI to touch upon these 3 areas in his talk. So he says to me, he says, Harpal, the first 2 I can address, but this interfaith thing, I don't know how to address. So I told him, I said, look, do one thing. That what you do is that nobody, at least no human that I know, and I don't think we have any record of any human, who had read the scriptures of all faiths and can claim that they knew it well. It's very difficult. Somebody says, I can read the Bible. Goodness me, that's serious enough. And then you say Bible and the Quran. Oh, goodness me. And then you say also the Granth Sahib or the Gita book. It would be impossible. So I said, why don't you tell ChatGPT to just read all these damn books of faith and give us the sifted comment where all faiths have a certain sense, there's a certain commonality of all faiths, and also give us the uniquenesses. Maybe humans will be able to address their respective faiths and be able to deal with other faiths with greater respect if the knowledge that comes from that comes from a fact that there's more commonality than difference. So we could use it. So therefore, whilst each one of us are unique, this combination of all of us being able to get together through interconnectedness, knowing where we are similar and being joyful of that fact, and also knowing where we are dissimilar and respecting that as well. I think, so there are many such like applications. So don't for heaven's sake think that you're not unique. You're bloody unique, that I can tell you. But you're also very similar. You're also very similar.
Anything else? Yeah.
Good morning, sir. I am Tanvi, first year IMBA. Adding to the previous question, I just wanted to ask, how can the new educational policy help in increasing interconnectedness of various courses that we have?
Yeah. So, in the new educational policy, there are some rather interesting, significant sort of aspects. One of the things that is significant is that don't treat your academic experience only with the subject. See its applications also. And therefore, there's a whole arena of new pedagogy that is coming around the idea of saying it's not simply to know physics and all its intricacies, but how does it affect actual life, and therefore, life and living and that sort of learning. So actually speaking, the new educational policy touches a lot about this aspect of saying, be somewhat more interdisciplinary in your knowledge, and recognize that at the end of the day, knowledge has to be applied. And so there is a certain amount of learning that happens. If you're a student of management and you've just done a bachelor's degree and now you want to do a master's degree, one of the things that all global good schools of management say is, don't just come to us after having done your undergraduate work. Come to us after you've worked for 3 or 4 years. And why do they say that? Because in the world of academics, it is now recognized that whatever you have learned up to your undergraduate level, you now need to experience the real world a little bit. And once you have imbibed that knowledge also, then you are ready and probably better equipped to go for a master's education. So actually, educational policy now is very largely getting interconnected with this question of interdiscipline as well as knowledge with the world out there.
Yeah, right at the back. There's a.
Hello, sir. My name is Pranama. I'm a second year IMBA student. So when you talked about interconnectedness, to understand that interconnection between different elements, we find some complexity within those elements. So how can we understand that? How can we make sense of that complexity and understand the interconnections between various fields or various anything elements as a student?
Sorry, interconnectedness between what?
Anything, whether it is elements, whether it is fields or anything.
What you're saying is, how do you identify the aspect of interconnectedness in things? How do you identify it? Is that the question?
Yes, how we identify and make sense of it, because when we try to understand it, we find there is complexity, because a lot of things are connected with each other. Yeah.
But the thing is that you will not ever have all the answers, right? But if I'm mindful of the fact that things are connected, let me say this. As a consequence of COVID, we found that it had implications in many arenas. One of the arenas is actually speaking mental balance, right? People found it very difficult to cope, and many of them had serious challenges. The issue is that if I was aware of the fact that I can be influenced by a variety of things, and that things are connected, and I understand that, I'm probably able to better cope with it. But if I think that it's only me that I'm affected, somehow it's only directed at me. You know, this question of why me? All of us have challenges, and many of us sometimes contend with the idea, it seems to be only happening to me, right? And whether you're a student, you lost a friend, and you're in depression because this friend is no longer talking to you. And then you think that you're the only one in that situation. But the moment you connect up with a few others, and you find that your problem is not unique to you, actually speaking, there are many others who have a similar problem, and therefore maybe interacting with people and trying to find a solution would help. So first, I think you have to understand the principle that everything is connected. And that, I think, is a fundamental to learning, which was not the case 100 years ago. You know that the first book that really even talked about, and the world got to know about the environment and its interconnected, all the elements are interconnected. Can you imagine, was only published in 1965. The book title, Silent Spring. And it was a 100-page, small book, not a very thick book, but for the first time brought home the fact that everything in nature is connected. And when it first came out, a lot of people said, what nonsense is this? Today, nobody says that. So therefore, I think the idea is that no matter what nature of challenge that you are faced with, no matter what discipline you wish to engage with, no matter what circumstance you're in, and no matter which part of geography you might live or what arena of work you know, understand the principle of interconnectedness. And you'll find that the moment you begin to, if your dad was upset with you one morning over breakfast, one way to look at it is to simply look at the fact and be depressed by the fact that your dad was upset with you. But then you also got to know that he lost his job. I don't think your anger level would be as high, because you say, I can understand why he might have been angry. So therefore, I think just this knowledge of this, and knowledge of it with some specific focus, attention, it'll help all of us if we believe in that connectivity.
Sir, I have a question. Sir, recently we had our 15th annual lecture, and Mr. Vishwanathan Anand was here, and he talked of very similar ideas of applying skills that he's learned in chess to life or to other areas. So which talks of interconnectedness. But he also stated how training in sport or any career, vis-a-vis sport at least, starts very early. He got admitted into the academy at 6. And I was reading this other book, which is called Range by David Epstein, which talks about sports players whose training starts really early when they're 3 and 4. So I get a sense that people who want to specialize or take up careers, sports included, would take that up very early and go deeper into that. So they don't get a sense of diversifying a sample size of other experiences before delving into something so particular. Does that work? Does that strategy?
I mention that focused attention can never be denied. Get that comment. So that you must be able to focus. So if you're a sports person and you wish to focus on your sport, but remember, to focus on your sport, you must understand nutrition. You must understand mental health. You must understand, what are the nature of exercises that will support whatever be the sport that you're wanting to do. So you automatically have to touch on a wide variety of things, somewhat more limited, but certainly a wide variety of interconnections. But this a question of learning, and it's now well established that all of us will have completed about 60% of all learning that we will ever do in our lives Have a guess by what age? Can somebody make a comment here? By what age would you have achieved 60% of everything that you will learn through life? By what age? Give me a comment. Guess.
18, 16.
18, 16. Guess, come on, come on. Sorry, say that loudly.
21.
21. Incidentally, the comment is 3.
3.
3. By age 3, in substantive terms, you would have learned much of what you will learn through the rest of your lives. And there, the question of how you learn. What are the values that people say now, all of us have tried to get to our mom's purse and take that, 5 rupee note if you can swipe it, so that you can buy yourselves a candy or whatever the hell you want to, right? I mean, the comment is that do it early, steal that 5 early. For God's sake, don't wait till you want to steal a crore, because society will hit you like a hammer if you do that. When you steal a rupee 5 note at age 4, you know that it is wrong. Because if it wasn't wrong, you would ask mom. You didn't ask mom, but you took that 5 rupee. What is happening to your entire brain activity? You're contending with stress. You're contending with right and wrong. You're contending with how do I cope? How do I deal with this? You're learning all those systems. They are getting embedded as learnings in your mental frame. If you don't do that, and if you haven't jammed a class, or if you haven't gone out late night when parents didn't know, if you haven't done some of those things, you will one fine morning, because you haven't learned. And then somebody will come along when you're 32 years old and say, we can swipe this thing, it's company money. Maybe if we do this, we can take a crore out. You haven't learned the rights and wrongs. You haven't done any of that. You'll be in deep trouble. So good learning actually, most of the essentials of real learning are over by age 3. So guys, you better reflect what you were doing at age 3. You know the way you might end up. That's how strong the real solid values get embedded. That's why we say parental, no matter what we might do in colleges and schools, fact of the matter is that the greatest training ground and learning ground is home. Is what you do in your home and in your community. Yeah. So I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah.
But it's
Thank you, sir.
So
Yeah.
just going back to add another comment on the initial published works of interconnectedness. J. Forrester's work on system dynamics and Club of Rome study leading to publication of Limits to Growth. That Limits to Growth book actually very, very vividly brought out the complete interconnectedness globally between population, agricultural output, pollution, manufacturing output from industry, and so on, taking 5 variables. And it was a complete global data available, and the system dynamics that they worked out. Of course, their predictions did not come through, because in the meantime, technology evolved and gave us more time, because they said that by this time, the entire zinc supplies will be out, this copper will be over. But then technology evolved, and we had access to all minerals further. But that apart, but I think this interconnectedness idea was very effectively struck when this book was published.
You're absolutely right. And, again, it just sort of alludes to one other sort of reality. We are limited by what we know. So any amount of prediction is basis the knowledge we know. And then there are some extraordinary thinkers who go beyond what you know, and H.G. Wells, for instance, who, but even he was in a sense limited. Now, if you were a material science engineer till day before yesterday, and you were the most knowledgeable about the material sciences, and you said a number of the number of materials that humanity is aware of, you would place a number, whatever that number is, I don't know. But just yesterday, that whole world has changed. Now, how much is true and all will still get established. But the fact is that the domain has expanded by a huge margin. And therefore, our knowledge is limited. I think the principle that we all, as learning beings, is to always have open minds, not have closed minds, have wide-angle lenses, you know, not be too challenged by newness. Many people get challenged by newness because there's a comfort of something that is known. Don't be too challenged by newness. And if you begin to imbibe that as part of your learning being, I suspect we'll be better equipped to address the future. Because the future is actually full of change. That goes without saying. Okay, I think.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. May I now request Professor Prakash Gopalan and Harpal sir to kindly release the conference proceedings of ENTENTE 2023. May I request Vice President NIT Parimal Manke, our conveners, Professor Manke, Dr. Sanyal, Dr. Vandana Suhag, and the organizing team of ENTENTE to kindly join us on the dais. So, Vivek sir, can we request you to join us on stage? Join us on stage.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. May I request President Gopalan to present a token of our appreciation to Harpal sir for his time and his words. Thank you, sir. Thank you for taking out the time. Thank you, sir. Yes. Yeah. Okay. May I request everyone to rise for the national anthem, please?
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ कलबंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उत्कल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाए तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you, everyone. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. Enjoy the conference. Thank you. The sessions shall start from 2 p.m. May I request you all to